Each time Mary discovered she was pregnant, she always had the same nightmare. Mary found herself in a forest, the atmosphere thick with an ancient, palpable dread. The ground beneath her feet seemed to pulse with life. Behind her, the ominous beat of drums would start a slow, rhythmic pounding that grew louder and more frantic with each of her panicked breaths. A masquerade would appear, a chilling figure, adorned with a mask that was both grotesque and mesmerizing. It would chase her through the twisted undergrowth, its movements unnaturally swift and smooth as though it floated above the earth. Mary would run, her heart pounding in her chest, the terror so real that she could almost feel the creature's breath on her neck. These dreams would invariably end with Mary tripping and falling to the ground, the shadow of the masquerade looming over her, its hands reaching out, and then she would wake up, drenched in sweat and shivering with fear. Soon after experiencing this dream, Mary would face another miscarriage, the loss arriving as suddenly and devastatingly as the masquerade in her dreams.
Well, well. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, you need to subscribe.
Mary endured years of torment under Mama Juliet's watch. The woman's jealousy knew no bounds. She was resentful of Mary's achievements and the love she found in Jayden, something her daughter Juliet could not attain. You see, growing up, Mary had been subjected to both emotional and physical abuse at the hands of her stepmother. One harrowing incident left a permanent mark not only on her skin but on her soul. It happened on an otherwise ordinary day when Mama Juliet had tasked Mary with blending peppers, a routine chore in their bustling household. As Mary hurried along the path to complete her task, fate cruelly intervened. She stumbled over a hidden stone, sending the bowl of grinded peppers flying from her grasp. The contents spilled across the dusty ground, lost beyond recovery. Heart pounding with dread, Mary gathered the empty bowl and headed home, her steps heavy with the inevitable tears and fear of her stepmother's wrath. Upon hearing the news, Mama Juliet's fury ignited with terrifying speed. She seized a broom and began to whip Mary mercilessly, each stroke a searing lash across her young body. Then, blinded by a venomous rage, Mama Juliet did the unthinkable. She grabbed a pot of boiling water from the stove and hurled it at Mary. Mary barely managed to dodge the full brunt of the scalding deluge, but the water splashed across her left thigh, searing her skin and embedding a scar deep into her flesh. This brutal act of violence was a chilling testament to the cruelty of her stepmother, a scar that Mary would carry for the rest of her life. Juliet, Mary's stepsister, lived a life starkly contrasted to Mary's. Where Mary faced expectations and burdens, Juliet experienced indulgence and leniency from their mother, Mama Juliet. This disparity in their upbringing was evident in every aspect of their daily lives. While Mary rose before dawn to manage the household chores, cooking, cleaning, and more, Juliet remained blissfully asleep, her mornings untouched by responsibility. Mama Juliet, perhaps blinded by affection, or swayed by Juliet's manipulative charm, consistently overlooked her daughter's failings. Juliet's days were spent in leisure and socializing, pursuits that required little of the discipline and dedication demanded of Mary. This favoritism bred resentment. Though Mary often kept her feelings tightly bottled up, her focus steadfast on her personal achievements and escape routes. Juliet's carefree and unchecked behavior eventually led to more tangible consequences. In her late teens, Juliet became embroiled in a scandal that sent shockwaves through their tight-knit community, a teenage pregnancy with a boy known more for his troubles than his prospects. The boy, a frequent figure in local skirmishes and petty thefts, was hardly the sort of match Mama Juliet had envisioned for her daughter. The revelation of Juliet's pregnancy was a blow to Mama Juliet's pride, a public smudge on her reputation as a mother and a member of the community. Despite this, her response was not to reprimand or guide Juliet towards responsibility. Instead, she doubled down on her protectiveness, shielding Juliet from the bulk of the societal backlash and quietly arranging for the necessary support and resources. As time went by, Mary graduated and got married to Jayden's. Their home was filled with laughter and love, an ideal setting for a perfect life together. 5 years of marriage, however, had woven a different story, one of longing and loss that neither of them had anticipated as they struggled to have their own kids. The specter of their childlessness cast a shadow over their once bright relationship, causing strains that seemed to deepen with each passing year. Unbeknownst to Mary, the root of their troubles lay hidden in the malice of her stepmother, Mama Juliet. Each time Mary discovered she was pregnant, she always had the same nightmare. Mary found herself in a forest, the atmosphere thick with an ancient, palpable dread. The ground beneath her feet seemed to pulse with life. Behind her, the ominous beat of drums would start a slow, rhythmic pounding that grew louder and more frantic with each of her panicked breaths. The masquerade would appear a chilling figure, adorned with a mask that was both grotesque and mesmerizing. It would chase her through the twisted undergrowth, its movements unnaturally swift and smooth as though it floated above the earth. The masquerade, with its exaggerated, menacing features and wildly scary attire, seemed a demon conjured from the deepest recesses of fear itself. Mary would run, her heart pounding in her chest, the terror so real that she could almost feel the creature's breath on her neck. But no matter how desperately she fled, the masquerade was always a whisper away, its presence an oppressive weight on her psyche. These dreams would invariably end with Mary tripping and falling to the ground, the shadow of the masquerade looming over her, its hands reaching out, and then she would wake up, drenched in sweat and shivering with fear. Soon after experiencing this dream, Mary would face another miscarriage, the loss arriving as suddenly and devastatingly as the masquerade in her dreams. Each miscarriage left Mary and Jayden reeling, their sorrow compounded by the eerie premonitions that haunted Mary's sleep. The mysterious cycle of miscarriages and the accompanying nightmares created a tapestry of grief and mystique in their lives. As Mary's world darkened with shadows of despair, an old friend came visiting. She brought a flicker of light to her gloom. Moriah was a childhood friend who had always been known to be a pastor's child. On the day of Moriah's visit, Mary narrated all she had been going through, especially the recurring dreams. Moriah sensed something unnatural in Mary's torment. She believed that a sinister, unseen force was at play, deliberately weaving Mary's misery. Determined to aid Mary, Moriah introduced her to Pastor David, her spiritual father known for his deep spiritual insights and prowess in battling unseen forces. During their meeting at the local church, Pastor David's face was a mask of solemnity as he listened to Mary recount her tale of unending woes. His eyes, sharp and discerning, seemed to pierce through the veils of the physical world into the spiritual, acknowledging the gravity of her plight. He prescribed a rigorous spiritual regimen, a week of purification involving psalms recited at midnight, fervent prayers at the break of dawn, and the strict documentation of dreams. Mary, her hope rekindled, embraced this spiritual journey with a mix of fear and anticipation. Each night, as she whispered the psalms, she felt as if she was stitching her frayed spirit back together. On the 7th night, the spiritual veil thinned. Mary dreamt of a gathering of demons, a congregation of demonic figures that danced around her in a macabre parody of celebration. Among them stood Mama Juliet, her features twisted into a grotesque smile as her laughter echoed ominously through the dream. This nightmarish vision was not just a dream, but a revelation. Mama Juliet was the puppeteer of her pain. This epiphany was both a breakthrough and a burden. Mary awoke on the 8th day, the weight of truth heavy on her chest. Armed with this new knowledge, she called Pastor David and narrated the dream to him. Armed with this revelation, Pastor David prophesied that Mary would indeed bear a child and urgently advised her to guard her home from outside influences. The warning proved prophetic. Within days, Mama Juliet and Juliet announced their visit, a seemingly innocent intention that Mary now viewed with suspicion. His warning was timely, as they requested to stay over. Remembering the pastor's words, Mary hesitated, but Jayden, ever the optimist, reassured her that all would be well for just one night. The dark night that Mama Juliet and Juliet spent under their roof was marred by an eerie tension that culminated in a chilling echo of Mary's most terrifying nightmares. Unlike her dreams, this terror did not warn her in slumber, but ambushed her in the dead of night, a tangible and cruel reality. The house seemed to pulse with an ominous energy. As the family settled into an uneasy sleep, the silence of the night was broken by the subtle sounds of movement. Mary, restless and troubled by an inexplicable anxiety, tossed and turned. Suddenly the room chilled, and a shadow flitted across the wall, a sight unseen but felt deep within her bones. At 3 a.m., a sharp, inexplicable pain awakened Mary. The room spun as she tried to sit up, her cries stirring Jayden from his slumber. He flicked on the bedside lamp, casting light on Mary's pale, distressed face. Despite his efforts to comfort her, the damage was done. By dawn, it was clear they had lost their child. The pain of this loss was both physical and spiritual, leaving scars that were not easily healed. The loss was unspeakable. Jayden, helpless and horrified, could only watch as Mary crumbled. In the aftermath, as they grappled with their grief, Jayden could not make sense of the experience, and somehow he felt he was at fault, because if he listened to his wife, this might not have happened to them, but it was too late for regrets. The next day, Mama Juliet sympathized with them as she parked her luggage and said she was returning back to the village. Mary wasn't back home yet, as her visit to the hospital isn't over yet, as she needed to see a doctor and confirm there were no complications. In the aftermath, Mama Juliet donned a mask of sympathy, her eyes feigning sorrow while her lips whispered offers of help. She suggested that Juliet stay to assist in the household, a proposal that seemed kind but was laden with deceit. Juliet's true colors showed not long after her stay began, as she brazenly made advances towards Jayden. As the tension simmered in their once peaceful home, Juliet's actions grew more desperate. One evening, she decided to make her move. She chose a moment when Mary was resting, hoping to find Jayden alone and vulnerable. With a forced smile and feigned concern, she knocked on the door of his home office, carrying a tray with coffee. "Jayden, I thought you might need a little pick-me-up," she said, stepping into the room with a sway in her step that was intended to be alluring. Jayden, deep in his work, looked up and paused, noting the unusual effort in her appearance. His brow furrowed as he watched her approach, her intentions becoming clearer with each step. "Thank you, Juliet, but I don't need anything," Jayden replied, his voice steady but his discomfort apparent. "Oh, come on, Jayden. It's just a coffee," Juliet coaxed, leaning closer, her hand reaching out to touch his arm. Her voice softened to a whisper. "And maybe we can chat a little. Mary won't need to know." "Jayden, I know you like what you see," she began, her voice dripping with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. She sauntered closer to his desk, her every step calculated to entice. "I have everything you need in a woman. Giving you kids won't be a big deal because I am very fertile." Jayden's hands clenched into fists at his sides as he struggled to maintain his composure. Juliet seemed oblivious to his discomfort, or perhaps she relished in it. "You just need to grab me by my waist, and I will give you the best time of your life, way better than my sister could have," Juliet continued, her words slicing through the tense air with venomous precision. As she reached out, attempting to close the distance between them, a surge of anger flushed through Jayden's veins. The audacity of her words, the blatant disrespect for his wife, his marriage, and the sacredness of their struggle sit was too much. Jayden's reaction was immediate and intense. He stood up so quickly his chair rolled back, bumping into the bookshelf behind him. His face hardened and his eyes locked on Juliet with unmistakable clarity. "Get out now before I lose my manners," he growled, pointing towards the door. "You have no place here, Juliet," Jayden said, his voice low and menacing. "Your behavior is inappropriate, and you disgust me. You disrespect my marriage and my home, offer this filthy body of yours to entice who? Me? Your brain must be rotten. Pack your things and leave before noon today, or I will personally throw you out." Juliet stood frozen for a moment, her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. Then, scrambling to regain some semblance of dignity, she picked up the tray and left the room hurriedly, her exit as chaotic as her plan. Mary, still weak and just recovering, overhearing parts of the conversation from the other room, emerged just as Juliet was making her hasty retreat. She looked from Juliet's retreating figure to Jayden's stern face, piecing together the scene. "What happened, Jayden?" Mary asked, her voice filled with a mix of worry and fatigue. Jayden walked over and took her hands, his touch reassuring. "It's Juliet. She tried to cross a line and she is leaving this place today." He immediately called the security to help Juliet pack her belongings. Mary nodded, her eyes reflecting the pain of yet another betrayal. She squeezed his hands, her resolve hardening. "We'll get through this together. No one will break us apart." The next day, Pastor David arrived, greeted by the somber couple. He listened intently as they recounted the events, his expression grave but his voice soothing. "My children, this is indeed a troubling time, but you are not alone," Pastor David said, placing a comforting hand on each of their shoulders. "The Lord watches over his flock, and you are under his protection. Remember, the enemy often comes in familiar forms. Stay vigilant and keep your faith strong." Mary and Jayden nodded, their spirits lifted slightly by the pastor's words and presence. As he led them in prayer, their home filled with a sense of peace, the shadow of Juliet's deceit slowly dissipating in the warmth of their renewed faith and the protective circle of their spiritual leader's guidance. As Mary's belly grew with the promise of new life, so too did their vigilance. Jayden, especially, was adamant that the past's shadows would not darken their future again. He had installed new security measures, including instructions to the gatekeeper that were as firm as the walls of their fortified home. One crisp morning, as the dew still clung to the grass, a car rolled up to their gate. Inside, Mama Juliet sat, her face gaunt, her eyes hollow, a stark contrast to the forceful figure she once was. She stepped out, leaning on a cane, her steps slow and measured. "I need to see Mary. It's urgent," she said to the gatekeeper, her voice lacking its usual command. The gatekeeper, recognizing her but bound by Jayden's strict orders, hesitated. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I have strict instructions not to let you in," he replied, not meeting her eyes. Mama Juliet's face twisted into a frown. "You tell Jayden that his mother-in-law needs to speak with him, now." The gatekeeper, uneasy but resolute, called Jayden on the intercom. Moments later, Jayden's voice crackled through. "What is it?" "It's Mama Juliet, sir. She insists on seeing you," the gatekeeper relayed, his voice betraying his nervousness. "Let me talk to her." Jayden's voice was firm, and a moment later he was speaking through the intercom. "Mama Juliet, you know you're not welcome here. Whatever you have to say it now or leave." Mama Juliet leaned closer to the intercom, her eyes narrowing. "Jayden, I am still family. This isn't just about you and Mary. There's something you don't know. Whatever it is, we don't need to hear it. You and your child have done enough damage." Jayden cut her off, his tone icy. "This is my family, and I will protect it at all costs. You are not welcome here. If you have something to say, you can call. Now, please leave." Mama Juliet stood there for a long moment, her cane supporting her trembling frame. Then, with a hiss of defeat, she turned and slowly made her way back to the car. The gatekeeper watched as the vehicle pulled away, a cloud of dust swirling behind it. Inside, Mary had overheard the exchange. Her hands rested protectively over her belly as she approached Jayden, who hung up the intercom with a sigh. "Was that necessary?" she asked, her voice low. "Yes, it was," Jayden replied, wrapping his arm around her. "This is our sanctuary, our future. I won't let her or anyone else disrupt it again." Mary nodded, leaning into his embrace. "Thank you, Jayden, for standing up for us, for our family." As they stood together, the weight of the past seemed to lift, replaced by the strength of their united front. The future was uncertain, but in that moment they knew they could face it together, fortified by faith and love. As Mary's pregnancy progressed, the vitality within her seemed to inversely affect Mama Juliet, who grew increasingly frail. Whispers among the family suggested a strange, almost supernatural connection between Mary's blossoming health and Mama Juliet's decline, fueling speculation and unease. Mama Juliet, feeling the weight of her waning strength, became desperate. She was aware that her time to influence or control any outcomes was rapidly diminishing. This urgency drove her to concoct a final plan, one that she believed would restore her health and secure her position within the family. Mama Juliet, feeling her power waning, called a family meeting, a last desperate attempt to reassert her influence. She concocted a plan, a vile last resort to end Mary's pregnancy, and she believed restore her own fading health. The meeting was tense, with family elders gathered around, unaware of the undercurrents of dark intentions. Mama Juliet, feigning a plea for unity, waited for the right moment to enact her plan. The family meeting convened by Mama Juliet holds a completely different tone. She sits at the head of the long dining table, the family elders arrayed around her. The air is heavy with anticipation, but not as tense as before, as Mama Juliet has promised a revelation and potential reconciliation. As the meeting begins, Mama Juliet clears her throat, her eyes scanning the room, meeting those of her family members, each gaze heavy with years of unspoken grievances and pent-up frustrations. "My dear family," Mama Juliet starts, her voice shaky with emotion. "I have brought us together today not to create more rifts but to bridge them. Especially with Mary," she says, turning her attention to Mary, who sits cautiously beside Jayden. "I have been a thorn in your life, Mary, and for that I am deeply sorry." The room grows quiet, the elders exchanging surprised glances. Mama Juliet continues, "I have reflected a lot on my actions over the years, and I see now how wrong I have been. I ask for your forgiveness, Mary. Not only as a mother-in-law, but as an elder who has lost her way." She then turns to the elders, her voice earnest. "Please, I need you all to help me make amends. I know I have wronged her, and I am truly sorry." The elders nod, murmuring among themselves, impressed by Mama Juliet's seemingly sincere contrition. They begin to speak in turn, urging Mary to consider forgiving Mama Juliet, highlighting the importance of family and unity. As the conversation unfolds, Mary feels a mix of emotion, surprise, skepticism, but also a faint glimmer of hope for a peaceful future. Just as she begins to respond, a sharp sensation interrupts her. She gasps, clutching her belly. "My water just broke," she announces, her face contorting with the sudden onset of labor pains. The room erupts into a flurry of activity, with Jayden immediately rising to support Mary. In the commotion, Mama Juliet's expression shifts from concern to panic. Seeing an opportunity in the chaos, she discreetly reaches into her bag and pulls out a small vial of ointment. Her plan, unchanged by her earlier words of reconciliation, remains dark. She intends to use the ointment to ensure Mary loses her pregnancy, believing it will restore her fading health. As Mama Juliet edges closer to Mary, under the guise of coming to help, but before she could grasp the vial securely, her young grandson Tola, blissfully unaware of the high stakes, burst into the room. "Grandma!" he shouted joyously, his little legs carrying him swiftly across the room. Startled, Mama Juliet's hand jerked, and the vial slipped from her grasp, tumbling to the tile floor where it shattered with a sharp, unmistakable crack. The contents spilled, a dark, oily substance quickly forming a small puddle. The room fell silent, all eyes now on the broken vial. Mama Juliet's face, previously composed, now twisted in a mix of shock and fear, her secret exposed. "No, no, no, this can't be happening," as she screamed, as she began laughing like a lunatic. "It was me, all me," she muttered, her voice a cracked whisper, barely audible. "The accidents, the misfortunes. I didn't want her to graduate, she did. I didn't want her to marry, but she did. Now, she is about to give birth. I didn't want that to happen, so all these years I was the one behind all the miscarriages. I am the masquerade that chases you at night and smiles at day," as she laughs out again, making everyone, even the elders, shocked. In the chaos that ensued, Mary began to feel contractions. As the reality of labor set in, Mama Juliet's facade finally broke. She began to spit blood, a physical manifestation of her spiritual defeat. As she confessed to her deeds, her voice was a mix of rage and madness, her mind unraveling before the shocked family. Mary was rushed to the hospital, her labor a whirlwind of pain and hope. As Mary was rushed into the delivery room, her heart pounded with a mixture of fear and hope. The past months had been a tumultuous journey of facing old demons and shielding her growing joy from the shadows of her stepmother's evil. The labor was intense and seemed to draw on the very depths of her strength, each contraction a reminder of the battles she'd fought, both physically and spiritually. Back at the family meeting, the scene had descended into chaos. Mama Juliet's confession, coupled with her sudden and horrific descent into madness, shocked everyone present. As she rambled and screamed, the dark truth of her envy and witchcraft spilled out, leaving the family in stunned silence. Her once formidable presence crumbled into that of a pitiful, broken woman, her plans shattered as completely as the vial of ointment that lay in pieces on the floor. At the hospital, the cries of newborns soon filled the room, slicing through the tension and fear that had gripped Jayden's heart as he waited outside. Mary delivered twins, a boy and a girl, their first cries a symphony of life that pushed the darkness of the past into the shadows. The joy of their arrival was overwhelming, a profound relief that washed over both Mary and Jayden, knitting their worn spirits back together. Jayden, who had stood by Mary through every trial, felt a swell of pride and love as he held his children for the first time. The pain and struggles of the past years seemed to dissolve in the light of their children's eyes. Mary, exhausted yet elated, held her babies close, her heart finally full. In the weeks that followed, the news of Mama Juliet's breakdown and subsequent madness spread through the family. No longer a threat, she became a cautionary tale of what could befall those who let jealousy and hatred consume them. She was confined to a care facility, her days of manipulating and hurting others over. Mary and Jayden's home, once a battlefield of spiritual warfare and heartache, became a sanctuary of laughter and love. The twins grew healthy and happy under the watchful and loving eyes of their parents. Pastor David remained a frequent visitor, his guidance and prayers a continued source of strength and peace for the family. The scars on Mary's thigh remained, a permanent reminder of her tumultuous past, but they no longer held power over her. Instead, they served as a testament to her resilience and the transformative power of forgiveness and faith. Mary often looked at her children, playing and laughing in the light-filled rooms of their home, and felt a deep, abiding gratitude. The journey had been fraught with pain and trials, but the destination a life filled with love and joy made every difficult step worth it. As she rocked her daughter to sleep one night, Mary whispered a prayer of thanks. The past could not be changed, but the future was theirs to shape, bright and brimming with possibilities. With her family by her side and love as their guiding light, there was nothing they could not overcome. The shadows of yesterday had given way to the bright promise of tomorrow, and Mary, once a victim of cruelty, was now the architect of her own happiness, crafting a legacy of love and resilience for generations to come. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel to watch more videos like this.